Welcome! You're listening to the Uncharted Lancaster podcast, where we explore the hidden histories, forgotten places, and long-buried secrets of Lancaster County. Using modern digital storytelling tools, each episode brings a new piece of local lore to life, revealing the strange, the surprising, and the stories history left behind. Let's begin.
Welcome to today's deep dive. I want you to just picture something for a second.
Yeah.
Picture a local, county-run nature preserve.
Right, like a standard weekend hike kind of place.
Exactly. When you imagine stepping out of your car at a place like that, there is this immediate underlying expectation of curation.
Oh, for sure.
You anticipate a gravel parking lot, a wooden kiosk with like a faded topological map under plexiglass, maybe some brightly colored trailblazes painted on the trees to, guide your way.
Yeah, it's very much the modern experience of wilderness.
Right.
It is wilderness that has been leashed, managed, and, ultimately sanitized for our convenience.
Yeah, sanitize is a great word for it.
You know that if you stay on the marked path, take your photos, and respect the closing hours, your experience will be completely predictable and safe.
Which is exactly why the subject of today's deep dive is so jarring.
It really is.
Tucked away inside a completely public, unguarded nature preserve in Pennsylvania, specifically the Clark Nature Preserve in Lancaster County.
Right near the Susquehanna River.
Right. And there, that illusion of the sanitized, predictable outdoors completely shatters.
It just vanishes.
Because just a short hike from that nice little gravel parking lot, sitting right there in plain sight without a locked gate or a warning siren, is a literal void in the earth.
It's just a hole in the mountain.
Yeah. It is a massive subterranean labyrinth that operates by its own brutal freezing and ancient rules.
And it goes by two names locally, Wind Cave and Cold Cave.
So simple, but so ominous.
Exactly. And our goal today is to really thoroughly understand this anomaly. We are going to break down the incredibly rare geological mechanics that birthed it.
Because it's not normal.
No, not at all. We will explore the bizarre, isolated ecosystem that somehow manages to survive in its freezing depths.
Which is wild on its own.
And perhaps most importantly, we have to examine the human psychology of exploration.
Yeah, the human element is crazy here.
We need to figure out what possesses a person to look at a jagged, pitch black, freezing crack in the earth and feel this overwhelming compulsion to wedge their body inside of it.
Sometimes with utterly disastrous, life-threatening results.
Very life-threatening, yes.
So to even begin to understand why Wind Cave is so profoundly weird, so dangerous, and honestly so alluring, we first have to take everything you probably know about how a cave is made and throw it entirely out the window.
You really do.
Okay, let's unpack this. When most of us picture a cave, we are usually picturing like a massive sweeping cavern.
Places like Crystal Cave, Laurel Cave.
Yeah, or those massive caverns out in the American West where you can walk through giant rooms.
Right. Those iconic caves, which make up the vast majority of the famous tour-guided caves across the globe, are what geologists classify as solutional caves.
Solutional, meaning they're essentially dissolved into existence over just an incomprehensible amount of time. I want to make sure we really nail the mechanics of this because the contrast with Wind Cave is so crucial. A solutional cave is fundamentally a story of fluid dynamics and chemistry.
Exactly. It requires a very specific type of bedrock to act as the canvas, essentially.
Like what kind of rock?
Almost always a highly soluble sedimentary rock like limestone.
Right, limestone.
Which is largely composed of calcium carbonate. And the process actually begins up in the sky.
With rain.
Yes. As rain falls through the atmosphere, it picks up carbon dioxide. When this water hits the ground and percolates down through the soil, it picks up even more carbon dioxide from decaying organic plant matter.
Okay.
This combination creates a very weak carbonic acid.
So it's essentially raining a very weak soda water.
In chemical terms, yeah, pretty much.
That's wild to think about.
And when this mildly acidic water seeps down into the ground and encounters that limestone bedrock, a chemical reaction occurs.
It starts eating the rock.
Right. The acid reacts with the calcium carbonate, transforming it into calcium bicarbonate, which is actually soluble in water. The water then literally carries the rock away, molecule by molecule.
Just flushing it out.
Exactly. Over millions of years, tiny hairline fractures in the stone are eaten away, widened into channels, then tunnels, and finally into the massive, echoing caverns that we pay admission to walk through.
So it is a very smooth, gradual chemical process.
Very slow.
It's like a dripping faucet slowly melting a hole right through the center of a sugar cube.
That's a great way to visualize it.
It takes millions of years, and the result is sweeping, smooth, water-carved architecture. But wind cave is not solutional.
Not at all.
It completely defies that chemical process. Geologists classify it as a tectonic cave or a fault cave.
Yes, fault cave is the key term.
And it is not carved out of limestone. It is formed inside something called ancient Wissahickon schist.
Which fundamentally rewrites the rules of engagement for this whole environment. Well, Wissahickon schist is a metamorphic rock. It was formed hundreds of millions of years ago under unimaginable heat and pressure during the collision of tectonic plates.
So it's tough.
Because of that violent birth, it is incredibly hard, incredibly dense, and most importantly for our story, it is entirely insoluble.
Meaning acid rain does nothing to it.
Exactly. It is packed with silicate minerals and these flat, highly reflective layers of mica flakes.
Okay, so when that slightly acidic rainwater trickles down to the Pennsylvania soil and hits the Wissahickon schist, it doesn't dissolve a single molecule.
Not one. The water just bounces right off.
The chemical dissolution process simply cannot occur.
Yeah.
The rock is totally impervious to the weak acid.
Therefore, you literally cannot have a solutional cave in this geology.
Which begs the massive central question of this whole deep dive. If the rock won't dissolve, how in the world do you get a massive 2,000-foot-long network of tunnels inside of it?
By breaking it.
Breaking it.
Tectonic caves are not carved. They are torn apart. They are formed by the actual physical movement of massive masses of bedrock.
Okay, hang on. Let me push back on that terminology for a second because I want to make sure we aren't painting the wrong mental picture for you, the listener.
Sure.
When I hear the word tectonic, my brain immediately goes to the San Andreas Fault. I picture massive earthquakes, cities shaking, the ground violently ripping open in a sudden catastrophic seismic event.
That's what everyone pictures.
Are we talking about an apocalyptic earthquake creating this void in a matter of seconds?
It is the most natural assumption when hearing the word, but we really need to scale back the Hollywood disaster imagery.
So no Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson helicopter rescues.
No, definitely not. In the specific context of wind cave, the formation was not a sudden, violent, seismic apocalypse. The mechanism here is gravity.
Just plain old gravity.
Gravity acting over an immense scale of time and mass.
Walk me through the physics of that. How does gravity tear open a mountain?
We have to look at the surrounding geography. Wind Caves is located in the walls of the Susquehanna Gorge.
Okay.
Thousands of years ago, the Susquehanna River was aggressively carving its way down through the landscape, cutting a very deep gorge into the earth.
Like it's slicing a canyon.
Right. And as the river cut deeper and deeper, the massive walls of rock on either side of the river valley were left exposed and unsupported on one side.
They lost their lateral support. They were just hanging out over the river valley, basically.
Precisely. You have this colossal mass of incredibly dense, heavy Wissahickon schist forming the wall of this gorge. And gravity is relentlessly pulling down on that mass.
He wants to pull it into the river.
Yes. But because this schist is so hard and unyielding, it behaves in a brittle manner. It doesn't sag or bend smoothly under stress like a softer rock might.
So it's rigid.
It is entirely rigid. So eventually, the immense gravitational stress overcomes the tensile strength of the bedrock.
It just gives up.
The mass of the gorge wall simply cannot hold itself together anymore. It begins to settle downward and outward toward the river.
And when it settles, the rigid rock fractures.
Exactly. The rock masses literally pull apart from each other along natural points of weakness. This creates what geologists refer to as nearly vertical joints.
So instead of a hole being smoothly dissolved, the mountain basically unzipped itself from the inside out.
Unzipped is one way to look at it, sure.
But unzipping implies a clean mechanism, which this definitely is not. I was trying to come up with a better physical analogy for this while preparing for this deep dive.
Oh, let's hear it.
If a limestone cave is a sugar cube slowly dissolving under a faucet, the formation of wind cave is more like taking a massive, dense block of brittle fudge.
Okay.
You push half of it off the edge of a table, and you just wait for the overhanging weight to cause the whole block to abruptly snap.
Oh, it's good.
The jagged, rough, terrifying gap that violently opens up in the middle of that fudge, that is wind cave.
The brittle fudge analogy captures the mechanics perfectly, actually. It really highlights the difference between chemical dissolution and physical shearing.
Right, it's a physical break.
And because this is physical separation driven by gravitational settling, it dictates the scale and the rarity of what we are dealing with.
Are these types of caves rare?
Tectonic caves are actually quite common in mountainous regions, but they are almost always remarkably small.
Right, if you were hiking in the mountains, you might step right over a tectonic cave without even realizing it.
Exactly. They are often just deep chasms open at the top, like a narrow ravine or a crack in a boulder that goes down a few feet.
You wouldn't even call it a cave.
Right. They are rarely cataloged because they're just insignificant.
But wind cave completely shatters the normal parameters of a fault cave.
It really does.
It is entirely subterranean, completely capped by the earth above it, and it boasts a staggering 2,000 feet of mapped passageways and rooms.
2,000 feet. That is a massive volume of empty space to be created solely by rock pulling away from itself.
It's hard to even picture that much rock moving without collapsing.
It is unanimously recognized as the largest tectonic cave in Pennsylvania. Furthermore, geological surveys suggest it is highly likely the largest tectonic cave in the entire eastern United States.
Wow.
And potentially the largest of its kind in the entire country.
Finding a tectonic cave of this magnitude, completely underground and navigable by humans, is just a profound geological rarity.
It is a once-in-a-lifetime sort of anomaly.
And because of this violent, snapping origin story, the visual experience of walking or crawling inside this space is totally alien compared to the tourist caves we discussed earlier.
The origin story completely dictates the architecture and the aesthetics.
It has to.
Because there was no acidic water dissolving the rock over millions of years, you will find absolutely zero speleothems inside Wind Cave.
Let's define that for the listener really quick.
Okay.
Speleothems are the classic cave formations.
Yeah.
We are talking about stalactites hanging from the ceiling like icicles, stalagmites growing up from the floor, the beautiful flowing sheets of mineral deposits that look like melted wax or frozen waterfalls, which cavers call flowstone.
None of that exists here.
None of it.
None of it. Speleothems require that calcium-rich dissolved limestone water to slowly drip into a void, off-gassing carbon dioxide and depositing a microscopic ring of calcium carbonate with every single drop.
Right, over thousands and thousands of years.
Since Wissahickon schist is insoluble, there are no dissolved minerals dripping from the ceiling. Therefore, the walls of Wind Cave are utterly barren of typical cave formations.
But they aren't just dull, featureless rock, which is where the aesthetics get really fascinating.
Oh, visually, it's incredible.
You mentioned earlier that Wissahickon schist is loaded with layers of mica.
Yes.
So instead of smooth, dripping limestone, the walls here are incredibly rough, aggressive, and highly textured.
Extremely sharp in places.
They are covered in sharp angles where the rock sheared apart. And embedded all throughout those violent fractures are billions of mica flakes.
So much mica.
When you shine a high-powered headlamp into these crevices, the walls literally glitter in the darkness.
It creates a really stark juxtaposition. The environment is visually stunning, almost magical in the way it reflects light.
Like a geode or something.
Yes, but mechanically it is jagged, unforgiving, and entirely uninviting to the human body.
And that uninviting nature brings us to the next major layer of this deep dive.
The climate.
Yes. This massive, jagged crack in the earth didn't just create a visually unique space. The physical layout of these intersecting fault lines actually birthed a permanent, aggressive, and bizarre weather system entirely underground.
A microclimate.
Right. This place isn't just called Wind Cave. Its alter ego is Cold Cave. And the physics of why it earned that name are just incredible.
The climatology of Wind Cave is perhaps its most hostile feature.
Tell me about it.
To understand why, we have to look at how normal caves regulate temperature. A standard solutional cave in Pennsylvania acts as a massive geological thermos.
A thermos.
Rock is a fantastic insulator. Therefore, deep underground, isolated from the daily fluctuations of the sun and the seasons, a cave will typically hold the mean annual surface temperature of the region it is located in.
Okay, so if you average out the blazing hot summer days and the freezing winter nights in Pennsylvania, you get a mean annual temperature of roughly 50 to 57 degrees Fahrenheit.
Exactly.
And that is what a normal limestone cave will feel like 365 days a year.
Which is quite comfortable, honestly.
Yeah, it's nice.
It feels like a cool relief if you enter on a 90-degree summer day, and it actually feels incredibly warm and humid if you enter during a blizzard in January.
Right, because 55 degrees in a blizzard feels amazing.
The temperature is a stable, reliable constant. But Wind Cave completely ignores this thermodynamic rule.
It throws it right out.
Extensive temperature data collected at this site reveals an environment that fluctuates between a refrigerator like 38 degrees and a literally freezing 30 degrees Fahrenheit.
I really struggle to wrap my head around that when preparing for this. How is it that much colder than the surrounding Earth?
It's all about airflow.
We have historical records of explorers going in with scientific thermometers in May of 1962. They checked the temperature meticulously throughout every single accessible portion of the 2,000-foot system.
Right, they mapped the temps.
And they found absolutely no discernible variation in any of the chambers or tunnels. It was uniform, punishing 30 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
In May.
The mechanism behind this extreme cold is deeply tied to its tectonic structure. Because it is a massive interconnected network of vertical fractures rather than a single horizontal tube, it creates a unique airflow dynamic.
Okay, so how does vertical versus horizontal change the air?
Well, cold air is denser and heavier than warm air.
Right.
During the winter, the freezing ambient air from the surface sinks down into these massive vertical joints, filling the entire void of the cave with sub-freezing air.
It just pours in.
Because rock is such a great insulator, the immense mass of the schist traps that cold air.
It's literally a walk-in freezer made of rock, storing the winter cold all year long.
Exactly. The thermal mass of the surrounding bedrock becomes supercooled, and this leads to the phenomenon that gives the cave its primary name.
Wind cave.
Yes. If you hike up to the entrance on a hot, muggy July day in Pennsylvania, the temperature differential between the massive volume of 30-degree air trapped inside the mountain and the 90-degree air outside creates a powerful pressure gradient.
So the air wants to swap places.
The heavy, dense, cold air forcefully pushes its way out of the lower entrance to equalize the pressure.
The cave is literally exhaling its freezing breath out into the forest.
It's a very noticeable breeze.
You can be sweating in a t-shirt on a hiking trail, approach this crack in the rock, and suddenly be hit in the face by a blast of 30-degree wind.
It catches people completely off guard.
It's like standing in a restaurant kitchen and having someone kick open the door to the meat freezer.
That's very accurate.
But what happens when that sweltering summer air inevitably gets drawn into the upper entrances of the freezing cave?
That collision of climates creates a phenomenal and honestly miserable subterranean weather event.
Miserable is the word.
Let's break down the physics of the summer condensation. When you have hot, highly humid summer air being drawn into a void where the rock walls and ambient air are locked at 30 degrees, you cross the dew point immediately.
It's the exact same physics as taking an ice-cold can of soda and setting it on your porch in mid-July.
Perfectly stated.
Within seconds, the warm humidity in the air condenses onto the freezing surface of the aluminum can, covering it in water droplets.
Right.
But in Wind Cave, that phenomenon is scaled up to the size of a subterranean cathedral.
The sheer volume of condensation is staggering. The hot air hits the freezing schist, and the moisture falls out of suspension. The entire cave begins to sweat.
Literally sweating walls.
Thousands upon thousands of heavy water droplets form on the rough ceiling and on every single protruding piece of jagged rock.
And this creates that stunning visual we touched on earlier. The heavy condensation actually washes the dust and dirt off the walls, leaving the mica flakes completely clean and exposed.
Which makes them extremely reflective.
So you shine your light, and you have this ceiling of raw, violent rock, glittering with vivid mica, covered in thousands of suspended water droplets, shining like diamonds in the dark.
It is aesthetically brilliant.
That sounds beautiful.
But practically, it is a nightmare for an explorer. Because as soon as you brush your shoulder against a rock, or simply wait for the droplets to gather enough mass to overcome surface tension, that 30-degree water drips straight down into the darkness.
Oh, man. It drips right down the back of your neck.
It's so cold.
It splashes onto your safety glasses. It soaks through your layers. You are navigating a freezing environment while essentially standing in a slow-motion 30-degree rainstorm.
That is the summer experience.
But if that is the summer experience, what happens to this environment when winter actually arrives?
In the winter, the thermodynamic shifts radically. The air outside the cave drops below freezing and loses its humidity.
Okay, so the air is dry.
Therefore, the air being drawn into the cave is no longer carrying massive amounts of moisture. The cave begins to dry out.
Oh, that sounds better.
You'd think so. However, whatever residual moisture exists inside the cave, the dampness on the walls, the puddles on the floor, undergoes a phase change.
Oh, no.
The extreme unyielding cold freezes it solid.
So the rocks don't just get cold, they get glazed in thick sheets of ice.
The environment becomes significantly more treacherous. You are no longer just dealing with wet rock. You are dealing with frictionless, jagged slopes in total darkness.
That is terrifying.
The winter temperatures inside the cave haven't been precisely charted continuously, but given the May reading of 30 degrees, it is an absolute certainty that the depths of winter plunge the interior temperatures well below that mark.
It just becomes a profoundly hostile environment for human physiology.
Hostile is an understatement.
And the architecture of this place, the physical layout you have to navigate, does not make surviving that temperature any easier.
Not at all.
We've established the walls are jagged schist and the air is 30 degrees. Let's walk the listener through the actual physical reality of moving through this maze.
Okay.
Because it requires immense, punishing physical exertion.
The mapped portion spans roughly 2,000 feet. There are two primary entrances situated about 75 feet apart on the hillside.
Right.
The main entrance immediately sets the psychological and physical tone for what is required of you.
Right, because the main entrance isn't some gaping, inviting cavern mouth you can casually stroll into with your hands in your pockets.
Definitely not.
It is a vertical crack in the hillside. It is about 8 feet high, but it is only 2 to 3 feet wide.
Very, very narrow.
You cannot walk into this cave normally. You literally have to turn your body sideways, compress your shoulders, and slide yourself between the jaws of the rock just to get inside the mountain.
And once you force yourself through that initial stricture, the geometry of the cave shifts dramatically.
It opens up.
The floor begins a steep descent. You enter a passageway where the ceiling abruptly vaults upward, reaching heights of 15 to 25 feet.
Right.
This tall, narrow corridor runs straight into the bedrock for at least 150 feet.
I want you to try and put yourself in that space mentally. You are standing in a hallway that is 2 stories tall, but it is barely wide enough for you to stretch your arms out to the sides.
It's extremely claustrophobic.
And everywhere your light hits, the fractured rock faces are clearly visible. You aren't looking at smooth walls, you're looking at the literal mechanical fall lines where the earth violently pulled itself apart.
It is a stark, intimidating reminder of the gravitational forces that created the space. You are essentially standing inside a geological wound.
A geological wound, that is a great way to phrase it.
But this grand, vaulted hallway does not last. The physics of tectonic settling dictate that fractures rarely run in a single, infinite line.
Right, mountains don't split perfectly clean.
About 75 feet into this main corridor, near a small secondary opening to the surface that sits 28 feet above your head, the geology forces a sudden change in direction. You encounter a cross joint.
The mountain didn't just unzip in one straight line. The stress fractures intersected each other.
Precisely. The bedrock split along multiple axes. So suddenly, this straight, tall corridor hits a wall, forcing an abrupt 90-degree right-angle turn heading directly south.
You have to make a sharp turn.
At the same time, the floor drops out from under you to a lower level. This intersection connects you to the bulk of the explorable cave system, which is comprised of 2 or more parallel passageways running deep into the rock.
So you are now navigating these parallel cracks. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the physical toll this takes on a human body is absurd.
It is exhausting.
The historical surveys and travel articles talk about moving from these tall, canyon-like corridors, which they cheerfully note are good for chimney climbing practice, into absolutely miserable structures.
We should probably clarify the mechanics of chimney climbing for the context of this environment.
Yeah, please do.
Chimney climbing is a technique used when a passage is too narrow to climb like a ladder, but too wide to simply step across.
Oh.
You have to physically wedge your body into the gap. You press your back flat against one wall of the cave, and you press your feet firmly against the opposite wall.
Like you're spanning the gap with your body.
Exactly. By applying opposing pressure, you lock yourself into the crack, and you slowly inch your way up or across a bottomless gap by alternately sliding your back and your feet.
Now imagine doing that. Imagine suspending your body weight over a black void by wedging yourself between 2 jagged pieces of rock.
It's nerve-wracking.
But it's pitch black. Your hands are freezing. You're wearing thick, non-cotton winter layers because it's 30 degrees.
Yeah.
And the rock is slick with freezing condensation.
It requires immense core strength, stamina, and psychological composure.
And that's just the tall sections,
Yeah.
because right after you finish chimneying, the cave forces you down.
The tall corridors frequently transition into low stoopways. The massive rock ceiling drops, forcing you to bend entirely in half.
Bending in half while wearing a heavy pack.
Right. You are carrying a heavy pack with backup lights and water, and you are forced to crab walk or crawl through these incredibly tight spaces.
And as if the tight corridors and the chimney climbs weren't enough, you also have to contend with what cavers call breakdown.
Breakdown blocks are a defining feature of fault caves. Because the environment was created by fracturing, and because the rock is highly brittle, pieces constantly peel off.
It's falling from the ceiling.
Breakdown refers to the massive chunks of rock, sometimes the size of a microwave, sometimes the size of a minivan, that have sheared off the walls or ceiling over the centuries and crashed down into the passageway.
So it creates a chaotic obstacle course. You aren't walking on a flat floor.
Never a flat floor.
The surveys describe having to execute short, agonizing crawls over and under these massive, unstable breakdown blocks. There is a specific section mentioned where explorers face a sheer 10-foot drop that leads down to yet another lower level.
Right. The lower levels are even worse.
This lower level is choked with numerous offsets and even larger, more treacherous breakdown blocks.
It is a punishing full-body puzzle. You are slipping on wet rock. You are crawling over shattered debris. You are chimneying across terrifying gaps. You are hunched over in stoopways.
And all the while, the environment is actively trying to sap the heat from your body while dripping freezing water onto your head.
It's relentless.
Which brings us to a truly fascinating biological question.
Ah, yes. The ecology.
When you look at an environment, this aggressive an environment, that is permanently locked at 30 degrees, entirely devoid of sunlight, lacking any internal running water, and requiring immense physical exertion just to move a few feet.
It seems entirely, completely uninhabitable.
Yeah. It defies the baseline conditions necessary to sustain almost any complex form of life.
You would naturally assume it is a completely sterile environment, just rock, ice, and wind. And in many significant ways, you would be right.
Because there's nothing down there.
Wind Cave is practically lifeless, and the most glaring omission from its ecosystem is the complete absence of bats.
Which is wild, because in the public consciousness, caves and bats are completely synonymous.
Inseparable.
If you have a massive 2,000-foot cave with vaulted ceilings and stable temperatures, you expect thousands of bats to be hanging from the ceiling. But there are absolutely no bats in Wind Cave.
It is an incredible biological anomaly. For a cave of this depth and volume to lack a bat population is highly unusual.
Very unusual.
The historical surveys note that this specific absence of fauna has been flagged by biologists and speleologists as a phenomenon worthy of intensive further study.
So what is the working theory? Why do bats refuse to enter this space? My initial thought is just the temperature. 30 degrees is brutal.
The temperature is a primary suspect, yes, but it's not quite that simple. Bats are actually highly adaptable, and many species actively seek out cold environments for winter hibernation, specifically to lower their metabolic rate.
Oh, that makes sense.
The deeper mystery likely lies in the origin of the cave itself, the tectonic formation.
How does the geology dictate the biology?
It comes down to the base of the food web. In a normal solutional limestone cave, you have streams or dripping water constantly bringing organic matter down from the surface.
Like leaves and dirt.
Leaves, soil, microscopic organisms. This organic matter, combined with bat guano, feeds a vast ecosystem of troglobites.
Troglobites, meaning cave bugs.
Troglobites are the tiny, specialized insects and crustaceans that live their entire lives in the dark.
So a normal cave has a thriving bug population.
Exactly. The bugs feed the bats and the bat guano feeds the bugs. It is a closed-loop system subsidized by water flowing in from the surface.
Right.
But Wind Cave has no running water. It is a dry fracture in insoluble rock. Therefore, there is no mechanism to wash organic matter into the deep tunnels.
No water, no food.
Without organic matter, you have no base food web. No food web means no insects. And an environment completely devoid of insects is an environment that cannot support a foraging bat population.
It's an ecological desert.
Yeah.
But I also wonder about the acoustics.
The acoustics.
We talked about how rough and jagged the schist is, covered in mica flakes. Bats navigate using echolocation, right? bouncing high-frequency sound waves off the environment to map it in real time.
Yes, that's their primary navigation.
Smooth limestone walls probably reflect those sound waves cleanly. But a jagged, highly fractured wall of schist covered in millions of protruding mica flakes, that has to act like a massive acoustic diffuser.
That is actually a highly plausible secondary theory. The complex, jagged geometry of the fault fractures, combined with the reflective properties of the mica, could scatter and absorb echolocation clicks in totally chaotic directions.
It would be confusing for them.
It would be the acoustic equivalent of trying to navigate a room full of funhouse mirrors using only a flashlight. It would be computationally exhausting for a bat's brain to map that space, making it a highly undesirable habitat.
So it's freezing, there's no food, and the walls scramble your radar. It makes perfect sense why the bats abandoned it.
It really does.
But, and this is where the story pivots from a geology and biology lesson into something straight out of a Gothic horror novel.
I know where you're going with this.
The cave is not entirely empty.
It is not. Against all ecological odds, there is one resident who has completely mastered this freezing, jagged labyrinth.
The Neotoma magister, the Allegheny cave rat.
Yes. While the bats, the bugs, and the amphibians have seemingly abandoned this tectonic fault line to the cold, the Allegheny cave rat has been documented nesting deep within certain sections of Wind Cave for a very, very long time.
How long?
The biological surveys explicitly state that these rats have been reported living in the cave since at least the 1880s.
Since the 1880s. They have staked their claim for over a century. And we need to be clear here. These are not the grimy subway rats you see dragging a slice of pizza down a set of stairs in a city.
Not at all. The Neotoma magister is a fascinating creature. They are large rodents possessing long furred tails and large prominent ears.
They look kind of different.
Biologically, they are incredibly well adapted to the cold, possessing a dense pelage that insulates them from the 30-degree ambient air.
They've got good coats.
But what truly sets them apart in the context of Wind Cave is their behavior. They are known for being highly intelligent, aggressively curious, and surprisingly bold.
Bold.
They do not exhibit the sheer frantic terror of human presence that most wild animals do.
They just sit there and watch you.
They really do.
There is an incredible historical quote in our sources that I have to read because it perfectly captures the eerie dynamic of this cave.
The Charles Moore quote.
Yes, it comes from Charles Moore, who was the president of the National Speleological Society back in 1953. He was leading a massive expedition into Wind Cave, and he wrote, "In Wind Cave, I watched 40 persons file by a ledge where a cave rat sat, seemingly fascinated by the unprecedented parade."
It is a genuinely remarkable image to visualize. You have 40 humans, which in a cave environment is a massive chaotic intrusion.
It's a circus.
They are making a tremendous racket, scraping boots against stone, shouting directions, shining dozens of high-powered lights in every direction, clambering awkwardly over breakdown blocks.
Just totally disrupting the peace.
And in the middle of all this chaos, this large rat just sits motionless on a pitch-black ledge, completely unfazed, watching them file past like they are a television show.
It's hilarious, but it's also deeply unsettling. The travel articles we review even joke about this dynamic today. The authors note that the rats are still there, they are still inquisitive, but they are, quote, apparently less impressed by spelunkers these days.
They've seen it all before.
In 1953, a human was prime entertainment. By 2026, the rats are just rolling their eyes as another group of college students in neon Patagonia jackets gets hopelessly stuck in a crack.
It highlights a fascinating psychological inversion that occurs in extreme environments.
What do you mean?
When human beings enter the wilderness, especially a cave, we naturally assume the role of the master explorer. We view ourselves as the apex entity, entering a domain to observe the primitive wildlife.
We think we're in charge.
Exactly. But inside Wind Cave, that hierarchy is completely inverted. The rats are the undisputed masters of the domain. They navigate the thumb-degree, three-dimensional maze effortlessly in total darkness.
They own the place.
We, on the other hand, are the clumsy, fragile, freezing intruders who can barely squeeze through the front door. We are the subjects being observed.
You really have to put yourself in that psychological headspace. You have been crawling for an hour. You were squeezing through a 2-foot-wide crack. The temperature has plummeted to freezing.
You're exhausted.
Your muscles are burning. You are shivering uncontrollably. Your headlamp is flickering. And up on a jagged rock ledge, in the absolute pitch black, just beyond the reach of your light, there is a giant rat silently watching you struggle.
It profoundly underscores how alien and hostile this environment is to human biology. The rats have adapted over millennia to survive the cold and the geometry. We have not.
Definitely not.
And that biological fragility brings us to the crux of the issue and the most dangerous aspect of Wind Cave. While the Neotoma Magister navigates the labyrinth with ease, human beings are far more fragile, far larger, and vastly more prone to letting their ego and ambition override their common sense.
So what does this all mean? It brings us to the human element. The juxtaposition here is incredibly jarring.
Right.
Let's reestablish the physical setting.
Okay.
Wind Cave is located in the Clark Nature Preserve in Mardick Township. It's completely on public land.
Yeah.
It's entirely free to access. And most crucially, it is completely 100% unguided.
There is no visitor center. There is no tour guide walking you through safety protocols. There is no heavy steel gate to lock you out if you show up in flip-flops and a t-shirt in November.
It's just open.
It is raw, unregulated wilderness. As the travel advisories explicitly state, the operating principle of Wind Cave is enter at your own risk because you're on your own.
It is raw danger accessed via a casual public hiking trail. And that kind of unregulated, unguarded access, combined with the fact that it is a known, massive 2,000-foot cavern system, acts like a siren song for a very specific type of personality.
The explorers.
There is an insatiable human drive for discovery, a need to push past the known boundaries, and the history of Wind Cave is defined by people taking extreme, sometimes absurd risks to find out what is in the dark.
The historical accounts provided in the geological surveys truly highlight the audacity of this drive. The map we have today wasn't just casually walked into existence.
No, it was fought for.
In 1956, a group of explorers decided they weren't satisfied with the existing mapped passageways. They believed there was more cave hidden behind the rock walls.
So what did they do?
They actually brought explosives down into the cave. They physically blasted open a side passage and managed to discover roughly 100 additional feet of subterranean tunnels.
I cannot get over the sheer insanity of that detail. They brought dynamite into a tectonic fault cave.
Yes.
A cave that was literally formed by the bedrock, fracturing and splitting apart under immense gravitational stress. The rock is already broken. It's inherently unstable. Massive breakdown blocks fall from the ceiling regularly.
Yeah.
And they decided the safest, most logical course of action was to set off high explosive charges in a confined space to see what was behind a wall.
The hubris and the fundamental misunderstanding of the geological risk is astounding.
Astounding is putting it mildly.
The concussive shockwave of an explosion in a highly fractured schist environment could easily trigger a massive catastrophic cave-in.
They could have buried themselves alive.
But incredibly, they survived, and the gamble yielded results. It proved that the cave was larger than anyone knew, and that discovery fueled further relentless exploration.
You just egged them on.
In 1962, explorers pushed even harder through the tight restrictions and discovered another massive void. A chamber measuring 12 feet wide, 20 feet long, and up to 17 feet high.
And the surveys heavily imply that the 1962 discovery is not the end of the line.
Not at all.
The geologists state that the possibilities for finding even more cave absolutely exist for anyone who is willing to invest the time, the grueling physical labor, and the immense risk to systematically enlarge the maddeningly narrow crevices at the edges of the map.
There is always more cave.
And that is the ultimate bait, isn't it? That whispered promise of untouched darkness. The idea that if you just push a little harder, squeeze a little tighter, you might be the one to discover the next massive room.
Exactly. It is a potent psychological lure. And historically, the way the cave was presented to the public only fed into that dangerous optimism.
How was it presented?
The historical surveys published in the mid-20th century framed Wind Cave in a very specific and frankly overly casual light. Official documents described the cave as reasonably safe and claimed it was easily climbed by the inexperienced.
Which, based on everything we have just meticulously discussed, the permanent 30-degree temperatures, the forced chimney climbs over bottomless strops, the massive breakdown blocks, the risk of hypothermia calling this place reasonably safe, feels like a borderline negligent understatement of the reality.
It represents a profound disconnect between the academic assessment of the rock stability and the brutal physiological reality of navigating the environment.
The modern warnings don't sound like that.
The modern texts and travel advisories aggressively contradict that old optimism. They explicitly warn that the cave is incredibly slippery, profoundly dark, disorienting, and features terrifyingly tight spaces.
Right.
The extreme cold poses a very real, immediate risk of hypothermia to unprepared visitors. And this disconnect between the casual historical description and the brutal physical reality has led to severe, life-threatening consequences.
The emergency response data backs that up in terrifying detail. The local news reports document that there have been 6 major large-scale rescue operations at Wind Cave since 1993.
That's a lot for one cave.
And what is truly alarming is the acceleration of that trend. 5 of those massive rescues have happened in just the last 15 years.
That statistical spike suggests that a higher volume of people, perhaps fueled by the proliferation of internet travel articles or social media posts showcasing the glittering mica walls, are venturing into the cave without the requisite respect for the environment.
They see a cool photo, just go.
Without the necessary safety gear, exactly. To understand the gravity of these situations, we need to look at the specific mechanics of 2 of these incidents, because they perfectly illustrate exactly how quickly things go catastrophically wrong in a tectonic environment.
Let's break down the February 2018 incident first, because it highlights the mechanical danger of the rock itself.
In February 2018, a Boy Scout was exploring the depths of the cave. He was navigating one of the tight, restrictive passages we described earlier. During a maneuver, he lost his footing on the slippery rock. He fell, and in the process, he dislodged a massive chunk of fractured schist.
Oh, no.
The rock came down and physically pinned him to the floor of the cave.
He was pinned by a massive boulder in a 30-degree pitch-black tunnel. That is the definition of nightmare fuel.
It is horrifying.
And you can't just call a tow truck to winch a boulder off someone when you're 500 feet underground in a 2-foot-wide crack.
The logistics of a subterranean rescue are incredibly complex. It took emergency crews led by the Rollinsville Fire Company an agonizing 7 hours to execute the extraction.
Let's talk about the physiology of that for a second, because 7 hours is an eternity in that environment.
It's a very long time.
When you are pinned under a rock, you aren't just dealing with the mechanical trauma of the crush injury, the restricted blood flow, the tissue damage. You are simultaneously fighting a desperate losing battle against the ambient temperature.
Yes, the threat of hypothermia in that scenario is immense. The rock walls are 30 degrees. The human body is 98.6 degrees.
So the rock just sucks the heat out.
Through the process of conduction, the rock actively leaches the heat directly out of the victim's body. Over 7 hours, the body goes through severe physiological stress. Vasoconstriction shuts off blood flow to the extremities to protect the core organs.
You stop feeling your hands and feet?
Violent shivering sets in to generate heat, rapidly depleting the body's glycogen stores. If the shivering stops, profound cognitive decline and eventual cardiac failure follow.
Wow.
The rescue teams are working against a ticking biological clock while trying to safely move literal tons of rock in a confined space.
7 hours of being crushed while the cold slowly seeps into your bones. It is a miracle he survived.
It truly is a testament to the rescue crews.
But as terrifying as the 2018 incident was, the second rescue detailed in the reports, the one from just recently, on September 8th, 2024, is somehow even more intense, because it wasn't a falling rock that trapped the victim. The cave itself simply swallowed him.
The 2024 rescue perfectly encapsulates the claustrophobic horror and the logistical nightmare of a tectonic cave emergency.
What happened?
A man was attempting to push through one of the maddeningly narrow, slippery crevices at the edge of the explorable map. He misjudged the geometry.
He went too far.
The passage was too tight, his body slipped, and he became inextricably wedged between the solid rock walls. He could not move forward, and he could not retreat.
He was entirely encased in the rock, and the response required to get him out was nothing short of a small army.
It required a massive response.
The incident reports list the agencies involved: the Rollinsville Fire Company, the Conestoga Fire Company, and a highly specialized heavy rescue unit called the Lancaster County Rescue Task Force Number 36.
Task Force 36 is an elite, multi-agency team comprised of highly trained members from the Lancaster City Bureau of Fire, Manheim Township, and Blue Rock Fire Rescue.
So these are the experts.
They are called in for the most complex, resource-intensive extractions. The operation required such an immense staging of personnel, specialized equipment, and command vehicles that local police were forced to entirely shut down a section of Bridge Valley Road just to accommodate the footprint of the rescue.
The scale of the surface response is massive. But when you transition from the command tent on the surface down into the cave to execute the actual tactical rescue, the reality is maddeningly, terrifyingly primitive.
You can't bring all that gear inside.
Right. They have hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment on the road, but they can't bring heavy machinery down there. They are operating inside a 2-foot-wide crack.
This is a critical point about subterranean rescue. The environment dictates the tools. You cannot bring gas-powered tools like a concrete saw down there.
Because of the fumes.
Right. The carbon monoxide exhaust would quickly asphyxiate both the rescuer and the victim in the unventilated space. You cannot easily use heavy pneumatic drills because the deafening acoustic trauma in a confined space would be devastating.
It would burst their eardrums.
And the violent vibration could trigger further breakdown and collapse the passage entirely.
So what are they left with? Raw muscle and steel. The incident report describes the rescue team spending roughly 5.5 hours in the pitch dark in near freezing temperatures, literally chiseling away the rock.
Chiseling solid, dense Wissahickon schist by hand.
I really want the listener to sit with that image and visualize the sheer brutality of it. The claustrophobia is suffocating. You have a highly trained rescue technician wedged into a freezing wet crack alongside a terrified, trapped, hypothermic victim.
Shoulder to shoulder in the rock.
The rescuer can barely move their arms. And for 5.5 hours, they are violently swinging heavy steel hammers against chisels, driving them into solid metamorphic bedrock.
The physical toll on the rescuers is immense.
The sound of steel on stone echoing in that confined tunnel would be deafening. The air would be thick with rock dust and sweat. They had to manually, inch by grueling inch, shave off enough solid stone from the walls of the crevice just to create the 1/4 inch of clearance necessary to physically hook harnesses to the trapped spelunker and drag him backward out of the hole.
Fortunately, despite the extreme ordeal, the reports note the man was successfully extracted and was miraculously uninjured beyond the physical and psychological exhaustion.
Thank goodness.
But the expenditure of public resources, the immense physical toll on the specialized teams, and the massive risk placed on the lives of the first responders is staggering.
They were down there all night.
The initial 911 call came in shortly after 6 p.m., and the exhausted crews did not clear the scene until around midnight.
6 hours of brute force labor in a meat freezer. Which forces the ultimate question. Why do people keep doing it?
That's the psychology of it.
The property owner and the travel articles we reviewed practically beg people to take the environment seriously. They explicitly list out the mandatory safety requirements. You must wear non-cotton synthetic winter layers to prevent hypothermia.
Yes.
You need proper rated climbing helmets, sturdy boots, a minimum of 3 independent light sources per person. You are strongly advised to go with an experienced guide who knows the maze. You are supposed to formally notify local first responders of your entry and exit times before you even step foot near the fissure.
The rules are very clear.
And yet, despite the warnings, despite the rescue statistics, people routinely ignore all of this. They walk past the kiosk, bypass the safety protocols, and wedge themselves into a freezing rock in jeans and a t-shirt. Why?
If we pull back and look at the broader picture of human psychology, there is a profound, almost intoxicating allure to the concept of the edge of the map.
The edge of the map. I like that.
We live in a modern world where almost every inch of the surface is cataloged, photographed by satellites, reviewed on Yelp, and thoroughly curated. An unlit, unguarded, massively complex hole in the ground represents a primal, raw challenge.
People want to feel like real explorers.
Furthermore, the historical descriptions claiming the cave is easily climbed still circulate, feeding into a dangerous psychological bias known as the illusion of control. People inherently assume that because the cave is located within a public, county-run nature preserve, the danger is somehow artificially mitigated.
They think, well, if it was genuinely life-threateningly dangerous, the county would have installed a steel gate with a padlock. Since it's open, it must be fine.
It is a fatal assumption. Wind Cave is completely indifferent to human expectations. It is a violent geological fault line, nothing more.
It doesn't care about you.
It owes us no safety, no handrails, and no mercy. The temptation of discovery, the tantalizing idea that you might be the one to squeeze past a tight restriction and suddenly find yourself standing in a massive, unseen, glittering chamber, just like the explorers did in 1962, acts as a powerful psychological drug that overrides rational risk assessment.
It is the ultimate ego trap. You think you can conquer the rock. You think you are faster, thinner, or smarter than the people who got stuck before you.
Everyone thinks they're the exception.
But the rock has been sitting there in the dark for thousands of years. It is infinitely patient, infinitely harder than human bone, and completely unmoved by your ambition. Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. Let's pull all these threads together.
We have explored a truly exceptional phenomenon today. Wind Cave is a staggering geological anomaly. It is a massive 2,000-foot void created not by the slow, elegant chemical grace of water-dissolving limestone, but by the violent mechanical tearing and unzipping of ancient bedrock under the relentless pull of gravity.
A completely different beast.
It is a space entirely devoid of typical cave formations, offering its explorers only the jagged, aggressive edges of insoluble schist and the cold glitter of mica flakes.
It is a permanent subterranean refrigerator, locked at a punishing 30 degrees year-round, generating its own aggressive internal weather system, sweating thousands of freezing water droplets in the summer and coating its walls in frictionless sheets of ice in the winter.
It is an ecosystem practically devoid of life, an ecological desert that cannot support the bats or the insects we associate with the underground, save for a highly adapted population of unusually bold cave rats who have silently observed our clumsy intrusions for over a century.
And finally, it is a dangerous siren call for unprepared adventurers. It is a place that demands grueling physical endurance, technical skill, and immense respect. Yet it continuously lures in and traps those who underestimate its maddeningly tight crevices.
A trap for the ego.
We started this deep dive talking about the illusion of the curated outdoors. We like to think of our local nature preserves as fully mapped, thoroughly sanitized, and perfectly safe for a Sunday stroll. We assume the true, dangerous frontiers are out west, or at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, or out in deep space.
But the reality of Wind Cave is a stark, undeniable reminder that wild, raw, and actively dangerous frontiers still exist right under our feet.
Right there.
They are accessible just a few yards off a well-trodden gravel hiking trail, operating in total darkness, completely indifferent to our presence, and entirely unforgiving of our mistakes.
Absolutely. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final lingering image derived directly from the geological surveys we reviewed today.
The unmapped sections.
Yes. The text mentioned that at the deepest, furthest edges of the mapped system, most of the tunnels eventually end in what they call choked tunnels, or maddeningly narrow crevices. Crevices that are too tight, even for the thinnest, most desperate explorer to squeeze through. But the surveys note that these cracks continue on, plunging for unknown distances deep into the solid rock.
Unknown distances.
Think about the implications of that for a second. If bringing dynamite into the cave in 1956 blew open a wall and revealed 100 feet of massive new tunnels, and if painstakingly squeezing through a terrifying crack in 1962 revealed a massive 2-story tall subterranean chamber.
What else is there?
What is sitting down there right now? What massive, freezing, glittering rooms are waiting entirely undisturbed, in total, absolute darkness, perhaps sitting just a few inches past the exact spot where those exhausted rescue crews finally stopped chiseling the rock in 2024? We will leave you to ponder what immense secrets still lie just out of reach in the dark.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Uncharted Lancaster podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating or review wherever you listen. It really helps more people discover the show. For more fascinating local history, visit unchartedlancaster.com. And if you'd like to go deeper, check out one of Adam Zern's books at unchartedlancaster.com/books. Until next time, keep exploring.